this feeling just grows and grows. With every sigh, I become more mad about you, more lost without you.
All right, good evening. I'd like to call to order the January 22nd meeting of the Board of Harbor Commissioners. Jeanette, will you please call roll?
Jim Sloan.
Here.
Corey Bantolin. Here. Betsy Kramer.
Here.
Stephen McIntosh.
Here.
Helene Webb. Here. Bill Spicer and Dennis Power will not be here tonight.
Okay. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, no changes this evening.
Okay. This would be the time that we have public comment that is not specific to anything on the agenda. And I don't see that we have any general public comment. So if anybody would like to speak, they can fill out a form and bring it up to Jeanette and we'll accommodate it. All right, so public comment is closed. Next, I'd like to move to approve the minutes from the November 20th meeting. Is there any questions or discussions? All in favor?
I move to, I'll second that. That's okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay. Would you like to read the recommendation?
Sure. Item 2, reappointment of Betsy Kramer to the Commission. Commissioner Kramer has been appointed to serve a 4-year term expiring December 31, 2018.
Scott, would you like to?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, just a little bit about Commissioner Kramer. This will be, she served on the Harbor Commission since 2007, nearly 8 years now. During that time, she served on various Harbor Commission subcommittees, including the Budget Committee, the Ad Hoc Parking Committee, Marina Reconstruction, Dredging, and the Chartering and Business Activity Permit Committee, which has been active lately. And she was also chair of the commission from July 2011 to July 2014. So we'd like to thank Commissioner Kramer for her service and welcome back.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here. I will sure will continue with the same interests of birds and harbor life and law. So thanks very much. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Great. Welcome back.
Thanks.
Department updates?
Yes, that's back to me again. Okay. In terms of council actions, the council executed a contract with Trans Systems Corporation in the amount of $87,895 to provide dock float inspection services for phases 5 through 8 of the Marina 1 replacement project. And the council also authorized additional expenditures up to $9,000 for extra services that might be required by change orders. And they provide the inspection of the concrete floats so that by the time they get shipped down to us, we're relatively sure they don't have any flaws or anything we can't work with. It's easier than sending staff up to Dixon, California to do it. So, also the council executed a professional services contract with Garden State Fireworks for the July 4th, 2015 and December 2015 Parade of Lights fireworks displays at a rate not to exceed $55,000. And the council also adopted a resolution correcting the waterfront slip fees for the remainder of fiscal year 2015. So a little bit on that issue as per background. On June 24th, 2014, the council adopted the waterfront slip fee resolution for fiscal year 2015, which was effective July 1st, 2014. Unfortunately, a draft of the fee resolution was submitted in all the chaos of the budget submittal that didn't actually have the 2% recommended slip fee increase that we presented here at the Harbor Commission, also to the City Council Finance Committee and the Council itself. And we did not discover this discrepancy until December. So the new resolution that the Council approved on January 13th corrects the slip fee section of the fiscal year 2015 fee resolution by incorporating the 2% slip fee increase effective February 1st, 2015, and credit for the July to January slip fee payments will be issued to all affected slip permittees in the February 2015 slip billing. So next month, everybody will be seeing a slight credit on their slip bills. The budgetary impact to the department as a whole is a loss of approximately $48,000 in revenue, and it's about an average credit of $42 for each slip permittee. Obviously, some folks with larger slips, it's a larger credit, and smaller slips are smaller, but this harbor's overwhelmingly, the majority of slips are under 28 or 30 feet, so it's not too significant on each person's bill. The changes, fortunately, to slip transfer fees were accurately represented in the fee resolution, so there were no changes necessary with slip transfer fees. And then moving on to the request for proposals for 117 Harbor Way, the former Transpac Marine site. The department released the request for proposal on November 19th. The leasable area is about 500 square feet of first floor space. In selecting a new tenant for the space, priority will be given to ocean-dependent and ocean-related uses per the municipal code and the harbor master plan, and visitor-serving uses such as general retail, gift shops, restaurant uses will be considered a lower priority than marine-related uses. The department received 24 inquiries about the space and had 22 showings of the space. But when the deadline passed at 3 o'clock this past Monday, we received 5 business proposals. So we'll be evaluating those with the RFP committee, which is Commissioners Spicer, Sloan, and Bantolin, and we'll be meeting in early February to review those proposals for the appropriateness and bring back the recommendation to the full commission at the February meeting. And finally, tentative agendas for the February meeting will be the request for proposals for 117G Harbor Way and fiscal year 2016 and 2017 budget overview. And that concludes the director's report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Reedman. Any comments or questions?
Chair, I have just one quick question about the fireworks. We're going to, we have awarded to Garden State Fireworks their contract for both the Parade of Lights and the July 4th celebration for $55,000. Is that right? How does that compare to the vendor that we've been using over the last couple of years?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner McIntosh, it's slightly more than the vendor we've been using the past couple of years. For instance, Parade of Lights has been running $4,000. In this case, it would be $5,000. And the 4th of July has been around, I believe, about $45,000. But unfortunately, we've had several failures where we didn't get everything that we paid for with the last vendor, so that's why we did an RFP to locate a different vendor. And these folks seem quite reputable. They've been doing the Disney World shows in Florida for like 15 years now. So we looked at their references, and they seem quite reputable.
All right, thank you.
I had one question. On the trans systems contract, is that covered out of the operating budget or out of the Marina Rebuild capital budget?
Mr. Chair, that's covered out of the capital improvement budget.
Okay, thanks.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. AIS Construction Company recently completed the fall dredging on December 23rd. This fall, they removed about 122,000 cubic yards of sand from the federal channel, which is right at the maximum allowed by the Corps' contract. The Corps' contract was reduced from 150,000 to 120,000 cubic yards a few years ago in an effort to save some money. And to put it in context, you can look at this bar graph here and see that it's relatively low. The potential for much more sand to deposit in the channel is there. So we do have expressed some concern about future years and increasing that funding back to what it was to make sure we have adequate funds to remove all the sand when necessary. This year, or this fall, the discharge location was located kind of in the vicinity of Calle Cesar Chavez. As you can see, this is kind of by the Fest Parkers Hotel. It's sort of the up coast limits of where we typically discharge sediments. This is a typical scene of the discharge. It's a pretty confined area, attracts a lot of birds, and it was very rapid growth of the beach this year. It was kind of easy digging, as they say. A lot of sand right off the tip of the sand spit. And when you look from this angle, you can see how a little bit of a peninsula builds out slowly, well, not slowly but surely, but quite rapidly this year. What's interesting this year that we're working on with the Parks Department, the Parks has initiated, is monitoring the shoreline position as sort of a condition of approval of a coastal hazards assessment they've done for the Cabrillo Bathhouse. So what we're going to try and do, or what they're trying to do, is capture just how this little peninsula moves down coast and nourishes the beach. Last March we had a large storm, one of the largest swells ever to hit Santa Barbara, and had quite a bit of coastal erosion, exposing this timber pile bulkhead that was installed in the late mid-1930s in response to the erosion after the harbor was built. It is gradually filling in with sand, so we try and move our discharge location kind of on either side of it to build the sand back in all along East Beach. So starting in the spring, in March, the discharge location will be kind of opposite the Cabrillo Ballpark, where we would like to put the sand, which is far enough down coast to stay out of the the wave shadow of the harbor, nourish the down coast beaches. This really helps the Cabrillo Bathhouse in that area of West Beach, or of East Beach. The budget has not been approved by Congress and the President this year, so we're operating under a continuing resolution. Fortunately, the entire budget was more or less approved under what they call the Cronmabus bill, the omnibus bill, and there's about $2.38 million available. So there's adequate funding for everything, which is a little bit different than the last few years where the continuing resolutions have only been for a couple months at a time. So it's somewhat reassuring. Spring cycle dredging will resume in March, and it should be business as usual. It's been a very mild winter, and it's kind of hard to tell how much sand there will be to remove, but if it stays the way it has been, there should be adequate funds, and contractually they should be able to get all the material that they're paid for. Our next item is a project that staff has undertaken in Marina 4. Marina 4A was expanded in 1999 to add 4 slips. When that happened in all the marinas, in marinas 2, 3, and 4, the end ties are about 4 feet wide, which is narrower than the state guidelines. Several years ago, we've had a couple projects, one on Marina 3B end tie, where we were awarded a grant to go ahead and expand that out to 8 feet to meet the Americans with Disabilities Act. And last year, we had, by contract, we expanded, widened 4B end tie to about 6 feet. That's where we have a lot of our commercial vessels. So it had been quite a bit of a problem. Our staff routinely rebuilds docks, finger docks and marinas to 2, 3, and 4. They've done almost all of Marina 2. They're starting on Marina 4 this year. So they kind of have the expertise to build these docks, but most of these docks are 3 or 4 feet wide and 30 feet long. So taking on an end tie that's almost 85 feet long is a pretty big project, but they were willing, and it turns out quite capable of doing so. These are a couple images of just working in the maintenance yard. The long dock, 85 feet long, had to be built in a couple different sections, kind of supported by a variety of different means. And here's sort of a finished project in the maintenance yard. And one thing I don't think you've seen for quite a while is this creative push-me-pull-you trailer that our staff built several years ago to launch these docks. Despite the length of the dock, it can be pulled lengthwise through the parking lot, simply enough, and then pushed into the water over the knuckle of the launch ramp. And what's nice about it is you couldn't possibly do it lengthwise. You'd wind up breaking the dock or having all kinds of issues. And you don't have to hire a crane, which we'll see from the next project. So it's worked really well. We've launched dozens of docks now, and this is the biggest one we've done. So we're really pleased with how it worked, and it really saves a tremendous amount of time and money. The docks are floated at the launch ramp and then taken over to 4A end tie and installed. A couple new features we have in the docks that we've built are, this is a pile guide. It's kind of new and unique and looks really pretty nice. We have some pretty talented staff working on it. It's a small thing, but it's kind of a huge improvement over the rollers that we've had over the years, and we've seen them fail in storms and whatnot. So this is an improvement that I think only facilities managers and maintenance staff can appreciate, but it is indeed quite an improvement. The finished product looks very, very nice. It included a new power center and water service. And this particular dock is home of the Channel Cat, which is probably one of the largest vessels we have in the harbor. It has been a problem in the past with a 4-foot wide dock because they have rather large dock steps and all their utilities, and it really crowded out the boats that you can see on the left side. They just really had a difficult time accessing their vessels. So this is an improvement that benefits the Channel Cat and everybody out there. This project is going to continue on all of the ties in Marinas 2, 3, and 4. We're going to start next with Marina 3C. And to put this kind of in perspective, our staff rebuilt this dock for a cost of $20,000 for labor and materials. And that compares with Marina 4B tie that was done by contract for $48,000. So this is an example of something that we can do in-house very cost effectively. And they did a good job. It was the first time they've tried anything that large. And so they're anxious to go forward and save ourselves some money and get some nice improvements on that side of the harbor. On the other side of the harbor, Bellingham Marine Industries has resumed the Marine One replacement project with Phase 5, including J and K fingers. They started last Monday with demolition, and they have really moved quickly. This is as quickly as they've ever moved. It took them about 3 days to demolish the docks. All the docks get taken over to West Beach by the launch ramp and stockpiled, where they're loaded onto where our staff goes ahead and takes some of the recyclable, more valuable recyclable materials, like the wiring, and turns that in. And then the rest of it gets loaded and taken to the Marburg Recycling Center. It was a condition of approval of the project to recycle as much of this material as you possibly can. That started Monday. On Thursday, new docks already began to arrive. This is the quickest we've ever been able to get these docks going. They're all launched by crane at the launch ramp, and you can see how a dock of that size, you couldn't possibly roll it in with a trailer. So it's a pretty costly endeavor to hire a crane, which puts our smaller projects into perspective. It's a great way to be able to use that trailer. So this is a pretty quick process. All the docks come in at the largest, about 40-foot sections, and they're kind of sub-assembled at the launch ramp, and then they're pushed across the harbor over to Marina 1. This is the main walk, which was put in on that day, Thursday. You can see all the vacant piles and none of the finger docks in there. But one thing I'd like to point out is that little white box is a transformer. One change with the new project is that code requirements have changed such that a transformer needs to be on each dock now, each of the finger docks, A, B, C, D, and so on. Now, prior to that, they were located on the main walkway. There were 5 of them, and they weren't in the way. But this is a little bit of a challenge to have one on each dock. We have dampeners and other cushioning to make sure that they're as quiet as possible, and they're as small as they can possibly be either. But that's a change that anybody, when the K-finger slip holders come back, they're going to notice a new transformer out there. But in general, it looks pretty good. Today, we received 8 new finger docks, and here, 8 days later, we already just about have all the new docks in. So it's really moving quickly. It's going to take about 2 to 3 more weeks to install all the utilities, all the electrical and water and the fire water lines and everything else. And then when they're done with K-finger, they'll move right on to J-finger, probably finishing everything up by the end of March. Phase 5 has been a particular challenge with respect to relocating all the vessels. One thing we've taken pride in with the overall project is we haven't had to ask anybody in Marina 1 to leave town and move to Ventura or Channel Islands. Some people are gone for a variety of reasons, which is convenient. But we've been able to accommodate everybody else with temporary slip assignments. These are pretty large boats by our standards, 35 and 40-foot boats with one large end tie. Like Scott mentioned, most of the boats are about 30 feet and under in Santa Barbara. So we've had some challenges. We've managed to get everybody in, but at the expense of really having no transient berthing. So what we're using for transient berthing, for the most part, for the larger vessels, are side ties. We don't normally have vessels there except for on something like the King Harbor race. And we'll take advantage of this opportunity if there's ever a large storm and vessels are seeking shelter. So you might see a couple times this year before the project's over several boats stacked up, but they'll be in the harbor and safe, better than being anchored out, and it's kind of the best we can do under the circumstances of construction. This project is funded by a loan from the Department of Boating and Waterways through several different loan installments. We've got a total of $14.5 million committed to Santa Barbara Harbor. Phases 1 through 4, the actual hard cost was $6,851,000. And we bid out phases 5 through 8 in a single contract, and Bellingham Marine Industries submitted a bid of $6,648,000, and this is excluding change orders and inspection and some engineering, some other costs associated with that. And to kind of put this in perspective with related to our budget is we're paying debt service on this incrementally as we borrow for each phase. Currently, our debt service is $484,000 for phases 1 through 4, and it'll go up incrementally with each phase when we'll finally max out after phase 8, actually phase 7, at $894,000 a year. This reflects a term of 20 years instead of 30 years, so this is a more aggressive payback than the actual loan requires. And it also reflects us paying for phase 8 out of our own capital budget, our Harbor Preservation Fund, of about $1,889,000. And right now it looks like our budget, we could absorb that into our budget, so that's how we'd like to proceed with this project. Phase 6 will be next year, fingers H and I. Phase 7, E, F, and G with a 4-dock expansion of F finger. And then Phase 8 will conclude the project in fiscal year 2018 with A, B, C, and D fingers. And thus will end a 9-year-long project to replace the majority of Marina 1. This concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Triberg. Any comments or questions? Okay.
I just want to make
Oh, go ahead. I'm
make
sorry.
comments. It's very impressive, and I'm watching that dock float out there the other day, and it's great work. Thank you.
Chair Sloan, I have one quick question.
Sure.
On the dredging project, Carl, we were limited to 122,000 cubic yards of sand this year. And it looks like from that slide we're significantly under where we've been in years past. Are you all concerned about that amount of sand or that little amount of sand being dredged every year or this year?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner McIntosh, in a mild year like we were having so far, it may not be a problem, but we still have February and March to go. What the Corps typically does when there's more volume than they have money for is they shift within different programs within their district, and we're already kind of suggesting that we be prepared for that if we do wind up having a lot of large swells and a lot of sand moving this year. So it's something that happens frequently, but most importantly, I think we're going to try and lobby to restore adequate funding and the yardage in the next contract, which will come up. We have this spring cycle, then one more full year, so when the next contract comes up, we're going to try and make sure they put 150,000 yards in.
Okay, thank you.
Carl, in the past, you've shown bottom profiles, kind of before and after. So is a bottom profile, to continue on with this line, are they the same as they were in previous years? Did 122 cubic yards coincide with getting the job done, or did we stop at 122 cubic yards and there's some areas that we would have liked to do or some areas we would have liked to do deeper and we didn't get to do?
Mr. Chair, we didn't get all of it. We went to 120,000 cubic yards, and the Corps kind of knows that we're going to be back in a couple months in the spring, so they kind of want to defer it, knowing that we'll do our best to get it all in the spring, and even if they have to shift a little bit of money around. But no, we did definitely leave some sand out there in the channel. The most part, it's safe and relatively deep and navigable, but yeah, there's a little bit of dredging that will still need to be done to completely dredge the entire template.
Yeah. Okay, so we got enough done in this cycle to get it good through March, and then we'll clean it all up in the spring cycle.
We focus on the shallowest areas and make sure that we've got pretty solid depth, and we just kind of adjust the buoys accordingly.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? No. Okay. Moving on to the harbor operations report.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Well, we got some much needed rain in early December, but we got slammed pretty hard on the 9th at the waterfront, as the rest of the city did. I'm happy to report there was minimal damage in the waterfront property proper. We lost a couple of trees and had some torn sails and what have you, which is to be expected in a 40-knot southeaster. But there were, in fact, 5 boats that went aground, none from our mooring area, all from anchorages free anchorages. And one owner removed the boat himself, and the others we had to contract to have those removed. And those folks have been billed. We are pursuing the financial reimbursement for that. And meanwhile, the consequence for not paying in a timely manner is those individuals are not permitted to berth, dock, or moor, anchor, dock, berth, or moor in city waters. So there is a consequence for them. While we do, everything we can to chase down the $7,300 we spent cleaning those boats off. I have a few pictures to show you of what that looked like and where those boats hit. Here's one that came up fairly early. It ended up high and dry and is fairly easily removed. This one, actually, this is kind of interesting. This one, you can see right here, this is what we call our trap line. And I'm going to credit Dave Meyerson, the former facilities manager, with the brainstorm to put this in. This is when we used to allow boats to anchor in the wintertime more closely to the wharf. This is a trap line that goes from the sand all the way out to a mooring ball on the Y of the wharf, and its name implies exactly what it's intended to do, stop boats from hitting the wharf and trap them there. And in this case, it did exactly as it was designed to do, and so we were able to kedge the anchor and tie that boat up to the trap line itself and keep it there before we got to it. The salvagers got to it. This one was all the way down east. You can see the waste oil barge outside there, offshore. This was all the way down toward the county line. This one ran up hard against an old cement jetty there. This one proved to be the most interesting. This one went aground right between a storm drain and the oncoming storm. So what it resulted in, it was getting water and sediment from both directions, and very rapidly started to sink into the mud. As a matter of fact, it almost went China syndrome on us here near the end. But thanks to Marburg and operating in an efficient and expeditious fashion, they dug a big hole, got under it, and got every bit of it out so that it didn't reemerge in the spring or summer and causing a serious public hazard. And yes, they filled the whole hole back in and raked the beach, and it was like it never happened. So that was the result of that storm. It was a quick response. We're looking to get reimbursed for the people who we had to pay to get their boats off the beach, but all was well in the end for the waterfront. So that was on the 9th, and then a few days passed. We had another storm, and miraculously the skies cleared and the seas calmed, and just in time for our Parade of Lights on December 14th. And the 29th Parade of Lights went off without a hitch. There were 25 boats that decorated to the theme of Gone Fishing for the holidays. We had the typical Santa's Village, which I'm going to show you a picture of here in a minute. The Santa's Village event at 3 o'clock, where we had 200 kids and their families lined up along the railing in front of West Marine just waiting for the event to start. So it's really gotten popular, and we're thrilled to see that as an important component of the event. And they had the 10 tons of snow and a lovely parade with 25 boats, and it was a crystal clear night. And just to honor the people who won, I'd like to just mention that Bernie Friedman, aboard the Perseverance, who's a fisherman, he not only won the commercial fishing category, but he won the grand prize for best overall. I don't think it's the first time Bernie's won that, so hats off to him. Rachel Williams, Channel Cat, won the commercial other category. Dave Dolores Arboleta won the powerboat category. And Janelle Ives, Feather Moon, won the sailboat category. And finally, one of the most important categories is the human power, because those are the people that get the coldest and sit out there in their open kayaks and even SUPs. I had conflicting information, so I'm going to mention everybody. I had Lisa Foote and Scott Engelman aboard either the Sea Mermaid or Santa's Fishmas, but congratulations to them both, no matter what their vessel was called. And so overall, this was we were nervous all week about the weather. I'm sure everybody was, but thankfully we have really accurate forecasts these days, and people were able to throw together magnificent decorations, and we had a great parade. And here are a couple of pictures I was mentioning from that. That's certainly not one of them. This is a picture of the kids and families lining up, waiting for Santa's Village to begin at about 2:45. I haven't seen a line like this since we've started including the Santa's Village element in this. And here's a young lady telling Santa what she wants. And by the way, the Maritime Museum has been instrumental, and this gentleman who plays Santa Claus has been doing it this gentleman who is Santa Claus has been doing this for many, many years. And he's just a stand-up guy, and he loves doing it, and the kids love him. And here's a young lady sitting on his lap telling him what she wants. Here's an entire family with Santa. Everybody, including Santa, looks really happy here, and this is sort of reflects the theme of Santa's Village, and what a terrific and happy event it is. And here's the snow part, which is, joy all over, if you will. These kids absolutely love playing in snow. They don't get to see it very often here in Santa Barbara. And so that concluded that part of it. And then the boats themselves, difficult to get really clear shots of them because they're going by at the east side of the wharf when pictures were shot. But you can see the gone fishing theme is played out on each of these photos. And so where they found the time to do it between storms to decorate like that, I have no idea. But we were thrilled that 25 boats participated, and it was a wonderful event. And finally, you're going to be participating in a commercial fishing slip lottery later this evening, but I wanted to inform you and the public that you're going to be doing another one here in March. This is the result of a slip permit termination that occurred in November of last year, of 2014, of a commercial fishing slip that was not appealed. The director was not asked to waive it, and there was no appeal forwarded to the commission. So again, because there are no individuals, commercial fishermen in the 60-foot category, it will go per the municipal code to a lottery for that slip. It's designated commercial fishing, like I said, and the lottery window will be widely advertised, and your drawing will be in March, on the 19th of March. And I want to announce that window now because it's going to be in the newspapers, and you're going to see it online on our website. But the lottery applications will be accepted from February 2nd of 2015 through March 5th of 2015. Any interested parties can obtain a commercial fishing lottery participation request form. It includes the eligibility criteria. They can get one at the Harbor's Master's office. They can get one online on our website, or they can call Jeanette, our executive assistant, at 805-564-5519. She can further direct individuals who are interested either about the slip permit lottery or about the eligibility requirements for participating in that lottery. So that concludes my report for this evening, Mr. Chair, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Cronman. Any questions?
Yeah, I've got one question. I have a question, Mick. I thought there was some sort of a fund to pay for taking boats off the beach.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Kramer, there is. We have money in our Abandoned Watercraft Abatement Fund, but we like to try and pursue it, getting the monies owed to us from the responsible parties first before we immediately delve into that fund. But yes, we have used that fund for these removals because they have to come off the beach fast, and it is billable cost to the fund. But that doesn't mean we relinquish our responsibilities or don't pursue reimbursement from the responsible parties going forward.
What were the causes of these? I mean, that's 5 boats is a lot for one storm. What were the causes? Do you have any idea?
Some of them dragged anchor. Some of them broke their anchor rode. Some of them were literally had either owners who were not on scene, not available. They were very run-down vessels, ill-kept vessels. So, they were not atypical of the kind that hit the beach in storms like this.
Thank you very much. I was curious in walking by, seeing them, and pretty unfortunate for the owners.
It's unfortunate for the owners and for the city.
Well, yes.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions, comments? All right, I had one. I noticed in the, thank you very much for the report, and in the Parade of Lights, I noticed in the written report you have next year's or this year's date. Would you like to mention that as well?
Mr. Chair, thank you for reminding me. Not that I want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but this year's event is December 6th, in case folks want to circle their calendars. It's a little earlier, but we try to time it with the tides. We try not to do these on really low tides for the fear that we'd either have to change the course near the wharf or somebody, God forbid, would run aground. And the theme for this coming year is Deck the Hulls with Boughs, B-O-W-S, of Holly. So thank you very much for reminding me, and if folks want to start decorating now, they should.
All right, thank you. Okay, I guess it's on to new business. Would you like to read the recommendation?
Yes, item 6, business activity permit with Santa Barbara Adventure Company. Recommendation that Harbor Commission A, review and consider the request from Santa Barbara Adventure Company to expand the scope of its business activity permit to include guided stand-up paddleboard excursions, and B, approve the addition of guided stand-up paddleboard tours to Santa Barbara Adventure Company's business activity permit, provided the guided tours use West Beach to launch and land the SUPs.
Great, thank you. Scott?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, in October of last year, Michael Cohen, who's the owner of Santa Barbara Adventure Company, requested that staff amend his existing kayak excursion permit by adding stand-up paddleboard, or SUP, excursions to it. Staff initially denied the request due to concerns with congestion and safety in the launch ramp fairway, and referred the issue to the Business Activity Permit Chartering Committee, which consists of Commissioner Spicer, Kramer, and Bantolin. In addition to Waterfront Department staff, representatives of Santa Barbara Adventure Company, Santa Barbara Sailing Center, and Channel Islands Outfitters were present at a publicly noticed meeting on December 16th of the BAP Charter Committee. And after considerable discussion, the meeting, I think, ran almost an hour and 20 minutes. After that discussion, the meeting was continued to a second publicly noticed meeting, which was held on January 6th. During the December 16th and January 6th meetings, the committee did not agree necessarily with the Santa Barbara Adventure Company statement that there is no difference between kayaking and stand-up paddleboarding, but did acknowledge that guided SUP tours have less potential impact on harbor congestion than rental and privately owned SUPs. Just for background, Santa Barbara Adventure Company SUP trips are limited to a maximum of 8 clients per guide and by the insurance requirements, but its trips actually average about 4.5 clients per guide in 2014, which is in your packet, those statistics there. So in the spirit of compromise, Michael Cohen agreed that Santa Barbara Adventure Companies would launch and land the guided SUP tours from West Beach and not the launch ramp. And the use of West Beach for launching and landing the tours in the quiet water area instead of the launch ramp fairway really satisfies staff concerns with adding to the congestion in the launch ramp fairway, which has a mixture of rental craft and large dive boats, that occasionally the Channel Cat and also the Condor Express. So we felt that was a good solution to the problem. At the January 6th Chartering Committee meeting, the committee recommended Harbor Commission approval of the staff recommendation 3-0, and staff also recommends an additional $250 a year fee for the stand-up paddleboard excursions, retroactive to August 1st, 2014, since he was operating in 2014, in addition to the established $250 a year fee for the kayak excursions. The permit will not confer any rights to promotional signs, tents, or storage on West Beach. And that concludes my report, unless there are any questions. And also, Michael Cohen, the principal of Santa Barbara Adventure Company, is here as well tonight in support of the staff recommendation.
Right, and thank you, Mr. Reedman. And Mr. Cohen has requested to speak, so maybe we'll let him do that and then open it up to questions. Does that work? Good evening.
Hello, everyone. I've gone to so many meetings now, I think I'll miss you all when I don't miss next week's. I'm dying to see what happens on the RFP and some other stuff, so I just might show up. I mean,
good, we'd love to have you.
I just wanted to thank everyone for all of their time and tell you that I understand that this was a lot of resources, particularly Commissioner Kramer, Ballantyne, and, of course, Jim Spicer, who's not here on the subcommittee. Thank you for all of your time. I wanted to just reiterate my main points, which were that although it is not exactly the same, it is similar or a variety of kayaking and SUP, and the industry still does see it very similarly. I do think that guided trips are safer, and we're only going to be doing guided trips. We carry radios and have trained staff. I also think that our ratios are 8-to-1, but we've shown through our statistics that in the last year our trips were an average of 4.5 people per trip. I don't know how you get a half a person SUP kayaking or paddling out there, but we're going to try to keep those trips small. I really wanted to just to reiterate that we are not part of the problem. We understand congestion is the big concern, and I think that this compromise is really a good solution. We actually prefer to launch and land off of West Beach, so I just wanted to say that I felt that the process was very fair and that all of the opposing opinions, all of everyone's opinions were heard, and I felt that the subcommittee heard all of those concerns and came back with the recommendation, so I'm grateful for that. I also think it's Scott's recommendation, and I really encourage you guys to please support this. In a spirit of partnership and cooperation with the other outfitters, we'll work down there in good spirit. We've already been doing referrals and talking about other jobs together, so I'm certain that we can overcome these differences and work together. And I just wanted to thank everyone again, and please request that you support this recommendation. Thank you.
Sure, I'll go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know Commissioner Spicer is not here, but Commissioner Kramer and I were there, and we did have a lengthy first meeting and had a shorter second one. But I think there's just a couple points I want to make. The concession to do it off of West Beach, I think, was big in staff's eyes. We also had some concerns with congestion in the harbor. I think guided only also helps that, and it does note a difference too. I think between the other operators are percentage-based tenants, and I do think that there is or was an issue there between being able to do everything when you're paying less for rent, and I think the extra $250 helps that a little bit as well. So I think this is a good compromise. That's why I supported it at the subcommittee. That's why I'll support it here today. I will comment that I think the other business activity permit holder may join suit and try to seek this as well. But with that said, I like the compromise, and I will be in support of the recommendation.
I feel similarly to Corey, and I think the compromise made by you, Michael, was really very good and very positive, and also by Skip and the Channel Islands Outfitters. I think everybody worked together, and particularly you with the waterfront. And what impressed me particularly was that your willingness, and you reiterated it here, of working with the others to directing some of your excursion clients or anyone interested into renting stand-up paddling and kayaks. So I think it's a really good solution to something that initially looked rather unpleasant. So thank you all.
Also, I want to thank you for your positive attitude and that we all work together in the harbor, and that's great. The question I have is, do you drive up with the stand-up paddleboards and park and then walk them to the beach, or how does that work?
Great question. I should have stayed. I love it here at the dais. I'll come back just to do public speaking, I think. It's good public speaking practice. To answer your question, we drive into the harbor. We have clear instructions to our staff that they are to minimize their parking, unload their gear, and get parked in a stall. If they're bringing a trailer, then they would go into a trailered stall. If it's just a small vehicle where we're putting them on top, then they would go into the appropriate stall. So the answer is we will walk them out onto the sand. Yeah.
A little more labor intensive.
A little more labor intensive, but we have that low ratio, so we're okay with that. So we think it's a good compromise. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Any other?
Yeah, real quick, just for the record, thank you for your work with staff and perseverance as well. I think it's good to support local business and
Thank you.
keep you healthy and up and running in all of aspects of your business. The log that you submitted with your packet, I just think it's important to point out for the record, the majority of his tours are 2 to 3 participants. There are a couple outliers where there was a group of 16 and 17 and 12, and that's really what pumped it up to 4.5 people per trip, but it's usually just a couple of people out there.
That's right.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah, from a marketing perspective, that's the best we can do. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So this recommendation was broken down into 2 parts. I think we heard and considered the request, and then the second one was to approve the addition of the guided stand-up paddle tours to Santa Barbara Adventure Company's business activity permit. And so do we have a motion?
I'll
on
make
that?
a motion to approve the addition of the guided stand-up. Sorry, make a motion to approve and staff recommendation.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? All right, motion passed. Thank you. On to item number 7. Jeanette, will you please read that recommendation?
Yes, item 7, West Beach outrigger permits. Recommendation that Harbor Commission A, receive a report on proposed amendments to City Council Resolution 14-048 related to distribution of annual West Beach outrigger, sailboat, rowing dory, and surf ski permits, and B, recommends City Council approval of amendments and incorporation into City Council resolution.
Great. Scott, would you like to?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners.
Oh,
I'll be
I'm sorry,
that's
Mick.
okay. I'll be
I'm looking
reporting
at
out
Scott,
on
and
this.
it's your.
No
Go ahead,
problem.
please.
I'm hiding behind the computer here. For over 30 years, the west end of West Beach, as most of us probably know, has been used to store outrigger canoes and Seashell Association vessels. Actually, they go back to the 1960s. And they also have their storage sheds there, too. One exception, of course, is the Kanaya Outrigger Club, which we see their kayaks stored at the west end of West Beach, and they've been there since 1990. Over the years, permitted uses have grown to include small sailboats, rowing dories, surf skis, and 8 small vessel storage racks. The intent here is that the city does what it can to support beach launch, small craft, ocean recreation within limits and parameters that I'll discuss in a moment. This is a plan view of where these activities take place on West Beach. As you can see, the green arrows are where the outriggers are, and the blue arrows are where the sailboats and dories are located. And you can see it's a pretty tightly circumscribed area, and the reasons for that are multiple. Some of them are big picture planning reasons, but there are also potential conflicts with recreational uses like volleyball courts, conflicts with industrial uses like the dredge yard and dredge equipment, and also the fireworks that we have at the Parade of Lights and the 4th of July. So for a long time, it's been tightly arranged in the blue and green arrows that you see there to the left. This is a photo of the outrigger area. You're looking out towards the sand spit, and looking the other area, you have the rowing dories and sailboats, and you see there behind the seashell sheds. So these are to the north. The others are to the south, or the upper left-hand picture as you're looking at it. So the department issues 50 annual West Beach permits each year. They're annual permits. They're sold on a first-come, first-served basis, and the permits are issued beginning the second Friday in March. They're divided up in various ways, and this has been one of our biggest challenges, is trying to keep pace with the ever-evolving nature of nearshore human-powered recreation. For example, we didn't know what a surf ski was several years ago. We'd never heard of sailing outriggers until just a few years ago, and we've tried to amend the City Council resolution in which this permit language is contained to keep up with the times, if you will. So currently there are 50 permits sold on a first-come, first-served basis. 22 are designated for sailboats, rowing dories, and surf skis. 3 are designated for sailing outriggers, again, trying to allocate the number of permits we thought would match the need and interest. And then the other 25 are for other outriggers, one person, two person, 3, 4, and 6. It doesn't matter. They're just out there. They're just any kind of outrigger goes. Rarely, but occasionally, and it happened last year, permits sell out. And last year, a longtime West Beach user who also represents one of the outrigger clubs could not purchase an outrigger permit. I think he assumed that, and I think he was also out of town, that he could get one a week later and what have you, and boom, or they were gone, and he did not get a permit for one of the larger categories, club categories. And what that does is, and I'll explain this in detail a little bit too, it reflects denying the ability to use these outriggers for a larger group of people. That's the club aspect that I say I'll talk about in a minute. And again, at the same time, one of the sailing outrigger permits was never utilized. And so we leave one on the table, and one gentleman who represents several folks in an outrigger club was not able to utilize the permit to do that. So last summer, in 2014, I was approached by representatives of the major outrigger sailing clubs, the outrigger clubs, and they asked me if we'd be willing to, if we could meet and talk about how these permits are issued and what the priorities are and how we could reorganize it so it balanced the needs of the community and the interests of the city, and so that it was all sort of more harmonized. And I agreed, of course. I thought this would be a great project to undertake, and I thought it would be a great education for staff as well as to really what the moving parts and dynamics are in the outrigger community. So we met 3 times, eventually, and we came up with, mutually agreed to, what you're going to see here are proposed amendments to the resolution that governs the issuance of permits to the West Beach outrigger permits. So the total number of West Beach outrigger permits, the West Beach permits would remain unchanged at 50. But we would move 2 of the surf ski permits from the combined 22 permits for sailboats, rowing dories, and surf skis to general outrigger permit category. Now, all of this is reflected in the attachment to your staff report in a showing changes version of the resolution because it's a little bit difficult to follow, as I said, all these moving parts. Basically, the number of permits would stay at 50. We'd move 2 of those 2 surf ski permits from the combined sailboats and rowing dories into the general outrigger permit category because they more resemble in design and use outriggers than they do dories or sailboats. And otherwise, the sailboat dory category would remain unchanged, and there would be 20 permits in that category. We also would propose to remove/relocate one of the 3 sailing outrigger permits. That's the category where one was left on the table last year, unutilized. And these, we would remove it and relocate it to the general outrigger permit category. So that would go from 3 to 2, and that 1 permit, which reflecting last year's experience, would go to the general outrigger permit category. The remaining 2 sailing outrigger permits would be convertible to the general outrigger permit category if they're not assigned by March 31st. In other words, if people didn't show interest in the sailing outrigger category, we wouldn't want it to lay fallow all year and unutilized by folks who might want it to use it for an outrigger permit. So they would basically have 2 weeks, the folks in the sailing outrigger category, to step up, get those permits, and utilize them for the coming season. Otherwise, they would drop to the outrigger category where the greatest amount of interest is. We would also intend to grant a right of first refusal to outrigger clubs utilizing the 4-person and 6-person outriggers, and were established clubs prior to January 1st of this year. It's important to understand for all of us that these clubs, and this was a lesson for staff as well, represent about 250 paddlers. So you have 250 paddlers represented in this about 5 clubs, 5 main clubs, compared to the remaining 15 permits or so would be utilized by people with 1- and 2-person canoes. And you're probably talking a total population of 20, 30, maybe 40 people who we would love to have utilize those permits, but by comparison, the community is greater served, we believe, by making sure that the bigger clubs have a right of first refusal when they come to the counter until the end of March. That offer, that privilege, if you will, would only be extended through the end of March. So when these folks come to the counter, typically what happens is they come to the counter. I'm representing, let's say, Santa Barbara Outriggers, and we're here to get our 5 permits, right? They would have right of first refusal. Those would be held aside for 2 weeks, so they would have the opportunity to come and get those permits. At the same time, if their club grows and say they came up and said, well, we want 9 permits, we would say, no, you can have the 5 that were agreed to and are codified by city resolution. The other 4 would have to be allocated to people coming up individually and taking them if they were available for the general permit, outrigger permit category. I hope that makes sense, and happy to answer questions about that when we're through here. And so this right of first refusal, as I said, would exist only through the end of March and then would drop back down into the general category if not utilized by then. So this would, in conclusion, we're summarizing here, we would keep the total number of West Beach permits at 50, and the proposed amendments that we're here discussing tonight would streamline the permitting process, accommodate the greatest number of shore-based boating enthusiasts, and we believe ensure access for permits for long-standing outrigger clubs. And that concludes my report. I believe there are folks from the outrigger clubs here tonight who may or may not have put in speaker slips, but they can certainly answer questions as well.
Great, thank you, Mr. Cromna. I do see that we have 3 speakers that would like to speak on this subject, and so I'll just call them up in order and do the best I can with your names. And please just keep your comments to about 2 minutes. Cherie Topper.
Want to see it, and if you have any questions, you might want to. I'm prepared to show it, but we don't need to do that. I basically just wanted to speak. First of all, say thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioner. Oh, okay. I want to first say thank you for allowing us to come and speak tonight. This is something that is near and dear to many of us who've been outrigger canoeing for the past nearly 30 years. The group of us, we're a group of local paddlers. We represent close to 300 individuals, and that's not including the broader community that we serve. That includes 2 501c3 clubs that are organized around 501c3 charities who also put on events that attract business into the community and serve people in the community far beyond just the club membership. So that's about 72% of the 6-man outrigger canoes that are on the beach represent that constituency. And I thought Mick did a fabulous job of explaining why we want to change these. It's basically to make the rules a little bit more flexible and also to avoid the instance where a one-person canoe would be able to replace basically just by being in the queue on the day that permits are distributed. You might have people with one-person canoes who completely decimate the 6-person canoe clubs just by virtue of their position in the queue on permit day. So we appreciate your listening to that. And then I thought, Mick, you did a great job of summarizing the puts and takes. And that's it. Do you have any questions?
No, I think we don't. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Next is Holly Sherwin.
As you know, my name is Holly Sherwin, and I've been an outrigger paddler with Santa Barbara Outrigger Club for the past 10 years, but I also own a single outrigger as well, and I paddle that year-round. And first off, I want to say thank you for listening to this proposed amendment, and thanks to Mick for meeting with us, because he really did work hard on many meetings to just streamline what was, a good proposal, but it just needed to be tweaked. And, of course, it really never came up until the incident where just too many people came in for those permits, and the big boats were kind of left high and dry without. So It is such a privilege for us who paddle to be able to keep boats there at the beach. You have no idea. I wouldn't do it 1/10 the time if I had to car top or trailer it. So it's really, really amazing, and we thank you so much for that. And so I kind of thought it was sort of a no-brainer, a win-win solution for everyone to just make this change in the amendment. And thank you for listening and making it possible.
Great, thank you very much. And last is Dan Janis or Jans. Come on up.
I really don't have much to add to what they said, but other than the same thing about what Mick has done. He was very receptive and open, and so was the city staff. So this is the changing in the wording and stuff is a reflection of reality and also the discussions that we had over a 5-month time period. So thanks for listening.
Great, thank you very much. All right, any commission discussion or questions? Corey?
Seems like a well thought out idea. We don't have anybody with a single or double here complaining. So, I think staff did a great job, and thanks for bringing it to them. And if nobody has a comment, I'll make a motion to approve the recommendations.
Second. I'll second that.
All right, I just had one question beforehand. Maybe you can take a minute, Mick, and just explain why the different categories rather than just 50 permits for everything in the categories. Why the delineation? What's the rationale behind that? Besides, obviously, the clubs versus the smaller crafts, but why not lump all the smaller crafts together?
Mr. Chair, fair question, certainly. I wasn't here when this first began to, evolve as a permitting animal, if you will. But my sense is that these are two entirely separate categories of ocean recreation. And these are easily separated. In one section, you have small sailboats, dories, rowing dories, and those. And outrigger canoes and canoeing is a unique and separate kind of activity. So I think the intention originally, and I'm speculating here because I wasn't here when it was first drafted, but I think the intention was to provide a certain number of permits for each community so that either community didn't overwhelm the permitting opportunity.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have a motion, and the motion's been seconded, so let's just make sure we know what we're voting on here. So we're voting on recommending to City Council that they approve the amendments and incorporate them into the council resolution. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right. Passed unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. Let's move on to the mid-year budget report.
Item 8, mid-year budget report. Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive and review a status report on the Waterfront Department fiscal year 2015 mid-year budget revenues and expenditures.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. As we do every January, we come to you with our mid-year report, 50% through the fiscal year. I should let you know that these are preliminary figures. This is about as good as we can get at the current time. Obviously, as the days go on, things get tighter and tighter, and the numbers get drilled down even more. But this should give you a very good idea, of where the department is at as a whole. And I should let you know, big picture-wise, overall department revenues are up 11.3%, and our expenditures are coming in right at the 50% level. This first chart is our year-end revenue projections, and this is an exercise we go through every year at this time. As you know, down at the waterfront, a good portion of our revenues come from the restaurants and the sales they do, as well as parking services. And one thing that keeps people down into both of those activities is the weather. And we're, again, in the third, if not fourth year of some amazing weather, so it continues to have a very positive impact on business, regardless of the negative impact of no rain for the environment and our city as a whole. So what we do is our primary revenue months are July, August, and September, so the first quarter of the fiscal year. And so it would be nice if we could just take the first half of the year and double it and say that's where we project to be, but that would be very skewed. Again, July, August, and September are our big revenue months. So what we do is we take a 3-year weighted average for each of these. On the left are our 4 programs, but those are broken down even further. So we go to the line item level and do a 3-year projected for revenue. So this chart has on the left, again, the revenue programs, property management, financial management, parking services, and marina management. The second column is the fiscal year budget, so fiscal year 2015. Then the third column has our actual year to date. That's through December 31st. And then the fourth column is our projection. Fifth column is our variance in dollars, and then our variance as a percentage. So looking at the big picture, we see our property management looking like we're going to come in about $445,000 above our estimated revenues that we budgeted. So that's a 9% increase. Again, these are all projections. Things can change, especially if the weather takes a turn. Our financial management program, which we had a presentation on last year, is run by our finance department, continues to be a bit lackluster, if you will, and it's looking to go down about 21%. Our parking services, when we factor everything in, is looking to be about 12%. I should say 12% over the budget last year. And then marina management, we're looking at coming in right at budget based on the numbers and the 3-year average. So overall, big picture, if you were to use these projections to go out, we are looking at about a 6% increase in revenues over budgeted estimates to the tune of about $764,000. Now, this next chart, it's a little twist. This is comparing the current fiscal year versus last fiscal year at the same time. So, again, what we have are our 4 main revenue programs there. And I should let you know that on attachment 1 of your Harbor Commission report, these are broken down, each of these 4 categories, into the line item detail. And so that provides a whole lot more detail, but for presentation purposes, that won't fit on here. So what we do is we give you the big picture. Our property management versus last year is up about $363,000. Our wharf commercial is up about 10%. Our harbor commercial services are up about 14%, and both harbor food service as well as Stearns Wharf food services are up over 15%. So again, that weather really has made a positive impact, and we just have good folks running the different services we have on both the wharf and in the harbor. Our financial management, still lackluster, same as the last chart. Our parking services is up by about 4%. We contribute a lot to the Luke systems that we have implemented that were brought out by the Harbor Commission, and those have done really well for us. And our marina management is up about 14.5% versus last year. And if you look again in attachment 1 in the line item detail, it's very informative as to what's going where. As for example, marina management, we've had 48 slip transfers in the first half of the year. Last year we had 29, and that was a significant amount. So I don't know what's going on out there, but our front office is very, very busy with slip transfers. Overall, we're about 11.3% above where we were last year at the same time, or a little over $800,000. Again, preliminary revenue figures versus 14, we're up. Property management 12.5%, almost 12.6%. The Harbor Main parking lot continues to see a lot of activity. It's up over 11% versus last year. And again, our marina management is tracking at about 14.5% higher than the prior year, largely due to the increase in our slip fee transfers. Switching to the other side of the page, expenditures. On the left column are the various programs that make up the Waterfront Department. The second column is our fiscal year 2015 budget. Then we have our year-to-date expenditures as of 12/31/14, and then what percentage that is of the overall budget. Again, being halfway through the fiscal year. Our as you can see from this chart, everybody's right at or around the 50% mark. Property management is a bit higher than that. And some of the ones that are a bit higher include encumbrances that we take on at the start of the year. So contracts that are for the whole year, but we suck it up at the start of the year. So that's a bit of it, can cause a bit of skewing. This chart does include all the encumbrances. If you were to take those encumbrances out, which is money that's promised as part of contracts and things like that, we'd be at about 44%. So we're well within our 50% range. We feel comfortable that that's going to continue throughout the rest of the year. We see no major hiccups at this point in time. I'm going to knock on wood there, and hope we can continue that through the rest of the fiscal year. Looking at expenditures on the big picture, we do have about $702,000 in the encumbrances that I spoke of. That's for everything from janitorial contracts, environmental contracts, and things like that. We've had about $692,500 in transfers to fund Carl's capital programs. And again, we are on track to stay within our fiscal year 2015 budgeted expenditures, again, barring any major hiccups or things like that. So that gives you a brief overview of where we're at halfway through the fiscal year. I'm going to be up here a lot in the coming months. Next month, we're going to have the fiscal year 2016 and 17 overview. Again, it's a 2-year budget program that we're moving into. And then in March, I'll be back with a final recommendation as far as the waterfront's budget. And in between that time, actually in the next 2 weeks, I believe, we'll be meeting with Harbor Commission's budget subcommittee, and we're going to go over all these issues, but in a little bit more, well, actually a lot more detail, and get them familiar with what we're looking at for 2016 and 2017. And that is the big picture for 50% through the fiscal year, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Bossy. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of comments. First of all, thank you for the report. It's very well done, Mr. Bossy. I like the fact that your expenditures are below budget halfway through the year. That shows great discipline on the part of staff and just a well-run department for us here in the community. I have a couple of real quick questions. One about the other expenditures, and this is on the last page of attachment 2, talking about the principal and the interest that are paying, the debt service that the waterfront department is paying on. It looks like almost 61% through the year, or halfway through, and 62 or 63% on interest have been paid. Is that just a function of the balances going down, and it'll be 100% by the end of the year, or were there some upfront balloon payments or unusual payments on the debt service at the first half of the year?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner McIntosh, that's a great question. This is a lot of our bonds are front-loaded, if you will, so we pay more in the first half than we do in the second half. So maybe it's the principal or maybe it's the interest. And so what happens is you'll get this skewed a little bit, but they're sure to get 100% of their money by the end of the fiscal year. It used to be significantly more front-weighted, but since we repositioned some of our debt as of last year that the Harbor Commission was made aware of, it kind of shrank that amount. I believe it was over approximately 70%, I think, at this point in the year. So we've done good with repositioning our bonds, and so it's a little less upfront than it was in the past.
Commissioner McIntosh, if I may add just a bit to that, a good example is our Department of Boating and Waterways loan. The entire loan, or the annual debt service, is paid on August 1st of each year. So the first quarter, that's our whole debt service to DBOS. So that's what Brian's referring to in terms of front-loading that. So.
I see. Okay. And then on the estimated revenues coming in from our financial management line, which is, I guess, LIBOR-invested funds. I know you probably get your numbers from the finance department on that, and they were projecting maybe a couple of interest rate hikes from the Fed this year, and that just didn't happen. Or do you all have any more color you can provide on that particular issue for the folks watching and for the commission?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner McIntosh, another good question, good points. The city, as a lot of other cities in the area, or all cities in general, participates in the LAIF program, which is a local area investment fund, and so it's a very conservative fund, if you will. I know Commissioner Bantlin has had some questions about how the city invests its money in the past, and we did have our our treasury manager here last year had a whole presentation on that. So it's a very conservative program that the city's invested in, and that I think goes back to the whole Orange County debacle in the early to mid '90s. So it's a very conservative fund. We can get you more information if you'd like, and we'd be happy to do that for you.
No, go ahead.
Commissioner McIntosh, one other thing to consider is that this last May, we refinanced our bond, which is our main debt service that we have. And that bond, the 2002 certificates of participation, we had a reserve in there, about $1.5 million in reserve. And that reserve threw off a little bit of interest, which was budgeted in the finance department's projections. Mm-hmm. And since the refinance occurred after the budget was submitted, we didn't have time to revise those interest figures down to account for that reserve, that interest-generating reserve going away. So I think that's part of what you're seeing there. It's more off than it usually is. So that's part of it.
Thank you. And then the last thing I just wanted to say, I also appreciate how conservative you all are being with the year-end projections. We're at 69% after 6 months in the property management arena. And if we don't get a lot of rain between here and June, we're going to be significantly higher than 9% over budget. And similarly with the parking services number and the marina management number, we're at 65% in marina management and 58%. 58% in marina management and 65% in parking services. So I just think the budget, the numbers are coming in really nice, and I appreciate your conservative approach to it.
Any other comments? Commissioner Bantalon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to Commissioner McIntosh, get used to it. They're usually pretty good and pretty conservative. So they do a great job. And thank you, Mr. Bossi. Just had one quick question. Garden Street. So the other decreases in parking seem to make sense or weren't very large. I think Garden's got 2 Luke machines, if I'm not mistaken, and they're not super visible, but I'm just curious if we have any insight into that one in particular.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Bantlin, that 10% decrease befuddles me. I have no idea why that would be. We do have 2 Luke systems there. We have one by the Chamber of Commerce building, and we also have one located near the entrance where you actually pull in. We are looking at in the future possibly adding additional Luke machines, one towards the Fish House where people exit to walk towards Cabrillo Boulevard, which could help with participation, as well as if in the back there, the proposed opening to the Funk Zone, that would be another point where we could capture some of that revenue. But that 10%, I have no idea why that is. As you can see, our other lots are doing quite well. There is, like you said, a small decrease at Cabrillo East of about 3%, which is generally one of our busier lots. It's one of our smaller lots. The other 2 we have that decreased were La Playa East and La Playa West. Those are the City College-owned parking lots, which we have access to over the summer and collect and get the revenue from that. This past summer, however, they had a major paving project in both of those lots. So for 1 month, one lot was ripped up, and then for another month, the other lot was ripped up. So that's why you see that decrease there. But I'm going to continue to watch the Garden lot and see what happens there. But I would anticipate by the end of the fiscal year, we'll be right on target.
Thanks. And the Fish House side makes sense. If I remember right, that's where the little honor board was before where you stuck the dollars in. And thanks for mentioning the connection. That's going to be former Commissioner Friedman's legacy on the commission. Just had one small request, similar to what Commissioner McIntosh was talking about on the revenue side. and you've had these charts before. Maybe it's in the regular budget, but just wanted to see that when we get there. On property management, parking services, and marina management, just like the last 5 years or something, maybe 10, I think it's helpful to see just a chart on those. And they're pretty good charts. So, well, I guess marina management is usually kind of all over the place, right? And is that how it is basically every year with slip transfers? Because it seems to be kind of tough to nail.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Bantlin.
Not on fees. Yeah.
They do fluctuate. They've been really good the last few years, but even pre my time here, I know that the department has seen just all of a sudden after the first of the year, they just fall off to nothing. So it's a very tricky thing to try and estimate. We do our best, and you just hold on and hope for the best. Again, this year we've seen a tremendous amount of slip transfers occur. It could end tomorrow. We're not sure. It could continue, which would be nice. So we're just going to have to ride it out and see. But generally, with the 3-year average, we're hoping by using that to project out through the end of the fiscal year, that will give us some sort of balance as we move forward. That's about as good as we can do.
Maybe if, maybe if possible, just to add that or break that out in that chart, just on the slip transfers specifically, since everything else is, pretty stable on that end.
Sure.
So thank you very much.
Commissioner Webb?
Thank you for your report and all your good work. On the slip transfers, are they small boats, big boats? Is it an average that you have on that?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Webb, great question. We tally these, and the way it breaks down is this year, this first half of the year, slips 34 and below, 34 feet and below, have 25 slip transfers. Slips 35 feet and above have 23 transfers for a total of 48. So it's kind of split down the middle, if you will, and I have all those numbers. It seems the largest category, the two largest are between 30 and 34 foot. We have 11 transfers. Between 35 and 39, we have 10 transfers, and then it kind of trickles off from there. One in the 50 to 59, and then we have one outlier that was over 100 feet, which was a big one. So this year it seems to be, and it generally seems to be that way, split kind of down the middle. If you take the 34, 35 foot as your middle.
Any other questions, comments? I had one just, it's almost a side note, but I noticed that the ice machine revenue is up. Is that because we rebuilt the ice machine, or what? It's not a big number. It's just, it kind of sticks out.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to think that's because it's been up and operating a whole lot more than it has been in previous years. That it's a good service for the fishermen. And I'd also like to think that they're bringing in more fish. So hopefully a combination of the two.
Good. Thank you. Okay. What's next? We have the commercial fishing slip lottery, correct?
The mooring program amendments.
Oh, the mooring program. I missed one.
Item number 9.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Adjustments to mooring program amendments. Recommendation that Harbor Commission amend policy revisions supported at its November 2014 meeting, deleting a requirement to create a mooring permit waiting list.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, as you remember at your November 2014 meeting, you voted to support amending the department's mooring permit policy by moving from a lottery system to a first-come, first-served system. And so staff has begun the work implementing those proposed changes. And we got to the part about the waiting list, and we had a good discussion about it, and we realized that this may be premature. We only have 22 folks. We have half the moorings are occupied, half the permits have been issued. And to put together a waiting list, it seems simple. You go ahead and, you have a waiting list, and you put together the language. But if you look at the municipal code and you look at similar council resolutions where waiting list procedures and protocols are articulated, it's extremely complex. And so it's not only that, but, we believe it's premature. We have 2 or 3 people knocking on the door who want to do the first come, first serve thing. It would be time-consuming because it would take a lot of city attorney review also, and wait lists are very, very difficult to manage. We've learned that with the slip wait list management. We've got a wait list, we have a master list, a sub-master list, a lottery list for 20-footers, et cetera, et cetera. It gets extremely complex. We didn't want to delay implementation of the most important facet of this, which is shifting from lottery to first come, first serve, in order to implement this waiting list aspect of the changes. And so rather than do that now, I think it would be certainly up for consideration as we get to 35, 37, slips, assignments, in the mooring field. We could come back to you at that time, have the discussion, develop those protocols and what have you, so they're in place by the time we max out. But we believe that implementing that now, we're sort of undoing something we did in November, would be premature, and we'd like your support on eliminating that part of it so we can move forward with the rest of the amendment in an expeditious fashion so we can serve the public who want moorings and they want them now. That concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments?
This seems like a fairly perfunctory activity or effort, so I would be for the vote, but just would like to say I will support it, support deleting the requirement for a waiting list. And I'll make a motion to that effect if somebody wants to.
Is there any other discussion?
I'll second it. It seems agree.
All right. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? All right. Motion passed. All right. Moving on to the commercial fishing slip lottery.
Item 10, commercial fishing slip lottery for 1A16. Recommendation that Harbor Commission conduct a lottery for the purpose of assigning a slip permit for berth 1A16 in Santa Barbara Harbor, a designated commercial fishing slip.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, in November of 2014, just about a year, only a few months ago, staff terminated the slip permit for a designated commercial berth in Marina 1A, a designated commercial fishing slip. That, like the one we discussed earlier tonight, was not appealed. And since there were no appeals, it went per the municipal code and city resolution to a lottery process. The lottery that we're about to participate in was noticed, and advertised in newspapers from San Diego all the way up to Monterey. A link was posted on our website. We made it as available and to the public and fishermen up and down the coast as we could. And so we believe that full coverage plus notices posted on our marina gates was about, due diligence as we could do to get the word out there. Ultimately, the window that began in November and closed January 8th garnered a considerable amount of support, of interest. 40 members of the fishing community spread across California, about half of whom, a little over half of whom I believe are local to Santa Barbara, turned in lottery applications. And so tonight we're here to do the drawing. Mr. Chair, what we request would be that you would draw 3 tickets from the drum and tell us what those numbers are and who the individuals are. And those 3, starting with the one drawn first, would be ranked in such order so that the one drawn first, we would enter discussions and make sure that the eligibility requirements are met with the intention of issuing a slip permit offer to them. Should they not be able to meet all of those requirements, we would move to the number 2 and then subsequently to number 3. And in the long shot that didn't get us a slip permittee, which I very, very much doubt, we'd be back here doing another lottery. So with that, I would encourage you or ask you respectfully to begin the lottery, and with our brand new drum that we're through taking them out of a fishbowl. We've gone high tech here. So thank you, Mr.
The hat?
Chair.
We don't have the hat anymore?
Yeah, we're done. Yeah, you got to see through it. That's for sure.
All right. Any questions or comments before we start this, Commissioner McIntosh?
One quick question. There are some duplicate names on the list. I'm assuming that each of the individuals that submitted are required to have a boat or a boat per name? They can't have two names for one boat that's looking for the slip, or is that just not the case?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner McIntosh, they're required to have at least $15,000. Let's go back to your question directly. They need to have earnings as opposed to being the owner of a vessel. They need to have, in other words, an individual who had $15,000 worth of earnings over the last 2 years, which is the earning threshold for being able to participate, could have earned it in Bristol Bay as a deckhand on another boat, as long as the fish, as we call them, fish tickets, fish landing receipts, were made in their name. They were eligible to participate in this lottery. Should that type of individual win and have their ticket pool ranked number one, let's say, they would have a certain amount of time per the lottery resolution to place a boat in the slip and complete that slip permit process.
You mentioned you saw duplicate names on here?
Yeah, I'm guessing that means that for these duplicates, if they are family or related in some way, they each have qualified per year, what you just stated.
Correct. That's our understanding, but of course, we will be checking that thoroughly. Spouses are allowed to participate as long as they have fish landing receipts in their names. And so we accepted spouses and family members, but of course, once we know who we're talking about here, we will thoroughly vet their eligibility.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, let's get started here. So we have the tickets here. How many names are on here? Do you know? 40? Okay, so we have 40 tickets in here. We'll put them in our new machine here. Can you hold?
It'd be cold. Should play some music.
Okay, so each name corresponds to a ticket number on this list here. Oh, okay. Okay, you want to give it a few spins there? Okay, hold on. We lost one, so it has to go in.
Stuck to the top here.
Okay.
There we go.
There we go.
All right.
Okay.
You want to pick?
All right. All right, the first one is 631448. And that corresponds to Jeff Mawson. All right, would you like to pick the next one?
Sure. The last three digits are 428. Which is going to be Randy Harmsen.
Okay, Commissioner Webb, would you like to select the last one?
Last four digits are 1429. That would be Travis Lobo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think at this point our work is done.
All right.
I appreciate your efforts in this and working with us.
Great. Okay. Is there any other commission staff communications at this time? Okay. Go ahead.
Nothing from staff, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So I guess we can wrap it up if somebody will make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll
So
make
move.
that motion. Their second is?
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Meeting over. Thank you, everybody.
On a tulip tree or one red